The new junior student is a genius. When running experiments, she always gets the data one step ahead of me. When writing papers, she always hits publish exactly 1 second before I do. So I decided to go into full-blown Goblin mode. I started pouring vodka into my test tubes and slipping glamour shots of myself into my slide decks. Everyone went crazy, begging on their knees for me to get back to real science. Phase 1 of the experiment ended. Once again, my results were a near-perfect match with Luna's. From the bibliography to the procedural steps, even the data retained to the second decimal point was identical. Professor King, face dark with rage, threw both reports onto the table. Talk. Who copied who? His sharp gaze landed on both of us, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. I looked at the 2 identical reports on the desk, brows furrowed, completely baffled. However, there was one thing I was certain of. I designed and executed this entire experiment independently. I didn't copy anyone. So you're saying I copied you, Chloe? Luna stood to the side, eyes red and voice choked with emotion, trying her best to maintain her composure. That look of suppressed grievance was a weapon in itself. She continued, but you have your own private lab. You lock the door every time you run an experiment. You guard against us like we're thieves. I can't even get in, let alone peek at your data. As soon as she said this, the noisy room fell silent. Because Luna was telling the truth. I've been considered a prodigy since childhood, possessing a terrifying memory and deductive ability. I skipped 5 grades between elementary and middle school, got into the country's #1 university at 16, and was snatched up by the academic titan, Professor King, the moment I started my undergrad. Now approaching the end of my master's, I wasn't even 20 yet. During my years at the institute, I'd been prolific, publishing countless papers in Nature, Science, and other top-tier journals. To focus entirely on my experiments, I had applied for a private lab. I locked it whenever I was inside. It was safe to say that, including Professor King, no one could enter my lab without my knowledge. Luna doing so was even more impossible. Everyone realized this. They looked at each other, speechless. A junior grad student spoke up timidly. Could it be a misunderstanding? It's not unheard of for data to overlap. Their topics are similar, and they use the same source data and materials. Maybe it's just a coincidence. She meant to soothe Professor King's anger, but her attempt at comfort only threw fuel on the fire. Once or twice is a coincidence. 3 or 4 times is also a coincidence. His eyes were sharp as knives. Since the start of this semester, Chloe and Luna's data has consistently overlapped. If everyone produces the same results, why do I need so many people in my institute? Furthermore, this experiment was specifically set up by the university to select a candidate for the Helios Prize. The probability of overlap is 1 in 10 million. Such a small probability happening in my institute is simply impossible. Professor King was a maniac for academics, possessing a borderline fanatical obsession with research. Seeing him this angry, no one dared to speak up again. The atmosphere turned frigid, punctuated only by Luna's soft sobbing. Suddenly, someone had an idea. The system's auto-generated logs have timestamps. Why don't we just see whose data came in first? Since Professor King was convinced someone plagiarized, checking who finished first would clear the innocent party. The proposal was quickly accepted by everyone. Professor King narrowed his eyes, scanning Luna and me. What do you think? I nodded in agreement. Luna straightened her back, tilting her chin up in a show of defiance. I agree. I wasn't the one who cheated. To ensure fairness, Professor King randomly selected 2 male seniors and told them to bring out their laptops. He had Luna and me log into the system separately to check the logs. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Luna and I sat on opposite sides of the aisle. The massive lab was silent, save for the sound of fingers tapping passwords onto keyboards. For some reason, the campus Wi-Fi was exceptionally slow today. The page refreshed several times but refused to load. I clenched my hands at my sides, inexplicably nervous. I could guarantee that I had derived every bit of that data step by step through experimentation. But after the weird coincidences of the past few weeks, I couldn't help but panic. Just like Professor King said, ever since Luna joined the institute, Almost every experiment she ran matched my results perfectly. But I couldn't find a reason why. Ding. The page loaded. I dug my nails into my palm and found the log for the final experiment. I clicked it open. It showed the final timestamp for the experiment was October 22nd at 11:08 and 35 seconds p.m. That was 5 days ago, in the middle of the night. I let out a breath. The time was correct. The students standing behind me gasped. "Chloe, you're amazing. You finished the experiment that early." I nodded. Although the difficulty level was high, I had done similar experiments before and knew which pitfalls to avoid. I made almost no mistakes and worked fast. I didn't believe anyone could be faster than me. Especially not Luna, the novice who couldn't tell a test tube from a beaker when she first arrived. I looked up, glancing discreetly at Luna. Seeming to sense my gaze, she turned her head. A flicker of a smile and provocation passed through her eyes, almost imperceptible. My heart sank. My intuition told me something was wrong. I was right. A second later, I heard her say, "Professor, I've pulled up my system." The final timestamp for the experiment log is October 22nd, at 11:07 and 35 seconds p.m. As soon as the words left her mouth, everyone's eyes snapped away from her and locked onto me. There was disbelief, shock, and suspicion. One was 08 minutes. One was 07 minutes. Any idiot knew which came first. This. My colleagues, who had been full of confidence in me, were now speechless. I was about to speak when Luna cut me off. "Chloe, I know you don't like me." Her tears fell at precisely the right moment, hanging like crystals on her cheeks. She looked at me with eyes full of grievance and confusion. "But you can't just copy my data. Do you know how hard I worked to get into Professor King's institute? This data is the result of my blood, sweat, and tears, repeating the experiment over and over." She sobbed. "If you wanted it, you could have asked me. I would have shared it. I'm willing to share with you. Why did you have to steal it?" I didn't. Seeing her story get more and more ridiculous, I spoke up to refute her. "I generated this data myself. I didn't steal anything." Luna just shook her head, crying. The situation hit a stalemate. The other students stayed silent. Originally, they thought that even if someone plagiarized, it wouldn't be me. But now, with something as objective as the system logs displayed in front of everyone, the facts were undeniable. Luna finished the experiment one step ahead of me. It was impossible for her to have copied me. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Did Chloe really copy Luna's results? I never thought she was that kind of person. I thought she was a genius. She's published so many papers. Maybe she copied and stole all of those too. Once a thief, always a thief. She just got caught this time. Professor King's face grew uglier by the second. My expression turned cold as I looked at Luna. "The timestamp alone doesn't prove I stole your data." "Yes, but..." She pursed her lips, hesitating. My gaze hardened as I stared at her. "But what?" "But as soon as I finished the experiment, I exported the paper and handed it to you to compile, Chloe." I frowned, not immediately processing what she was saying. She logged into her WeChat account and opened her chat history with me. It clearly showed that at 11:07 p.m. on October 22nd, she had sent the report to me. I jerked my head up, meeting her tear-stained face. Deep in her eyes, however, was a trace of triumph she could barely hide. Then the corner of her mouth twitched upward slightly. She closed the page and gave a helpless smile. I sent the report to Chloe at 07 minutes, and Chloe finished her experiment at 08 minutes. That really is too coincidental. But if Chloe says she didn't steal, then she didn't steal. She continued. "I don't have as much seniority or experience as Chloe in this lab. No one will believe anything I say." I wanted to explain, but I choked on the first word. What could I say? That after she sent the report, I didn't open it immediately? That later, when I was compiling, I just downloaded everyone's files without looking at the content? The more I said, the guiltier I would sound. Enough. Everyone disperse. Professor King didn't give me a chance to explain. With a dark face, he cast a cold glare at me, then waved his hand and turned to leave. After that incident, Almost everyone decided I was the thief who stole someone else's work. My treatment at the institute plummeted. The attitude of the junior students toward me did a complete 180. Professor King began ignoring and suppressing me in every way possible. Not only did he suspend all my current projects and hand them to others, but he also took back the experiment I was about to wrap up. The reason? Character issues. If I didn't have several patents currently under review, I probably would have been kicked out already. In contrast, Luna's reputation as a genius spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire university heard that the research institute had a new prodigy. In experiments, she was always one step faster than me. With papers, she always published 1 second before me. So what kind of genius is Chloe? I think it was all hype. Luna, you're the real deal. Yeah, we all heard about Chloe copying your data. I bet her achievements were just purely result of the resources thrown at her. Who knows whose work she stole before? Unlike you, Luna, relying on yourself. I had just walked to the entrance of the institute when I saw a group surrounding Luna. By the way, Luna, is the university sending you or Chloe to the Helios Prize? Hearing the words Helios Prize, I paused. The Helios Prize was a world-class scientific competition held every 3 years. Only the top 50 universities in the world were eligible to compete. Each university selected its most outstanding, talented student to participate. If you won, not only would your institute receive hundreds of millions in funding, but the university's ranking would also jump significantly. While I was lost in thought, the group inside spotted me. The corners of the juniors' mouths turned down. Luna, on the other hand, smiled, her eyes curving into crescents. Chloe, perfect timing. Let's enter the Helios Prize together. I frowned. I recall there's only one spot. Luna nodded, glancing at me pointedly. She twisted the hem of her shirt, speaking vaguely. There is only one spot. Professor King is still angry about the last incident, so he asked me to go. But don't be upset, Chloe. I'll plead with Professor King for you. I'll ask him to apply for an extra spot. She continued. I know it hasn't been easy for you to get where you are. You shouldn't be written off just because you made a mistake once or twice. We'll go together. I let out a cold laugh. Before I could speak, the people standing next to her cut in. Luna, you're too kind. You're helping the person who stabbed you in the back. If you ask me, you should keep this opportunity for yourself. Some people are habitual offenders. Who's to say she won't copy you during the competition? Only after they finished did Luna slowly intervene. Don't say that. Chloe isn't that kind of person. She just made a mistake in the moment. She's changed. Watching them sing this duet to convict me, I found it hilarious. I said, I'm not planning to enter the Helios Prize. You go by yourself. I thought my refusal would make Luna happy, given her hostility. I expected her to break out the champagne. Instead, her eyes went wide, shocked as if she'd been struck by lightning. Beyond the disbelief, a flash of panic crossed her eyes. Why aren't you going? I frowned, finding it strange. If I don't want to go, I don't want to go. Why does there have to be a reason? I didn't want to tangle with her, so I turned to leave. Unexpectedly, she reached out and grabbed my arm. No, you have to go. If you don't go, what will I do? Her grip was strong, hurting me enough to make me hiss. Perhaps realizing her reaction was too extreme, she loosened her grip and tried to backtrack. I just think it's such an important competition. It would be a pity if you didn't participate. Professor King has high hopes for you. You really should go. I said, I'll talk to Professor King myself. I'm not competing. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Luna tried playing the victim again, attempting to emotionally blackmail me. Is it because you hate that Professor King gave your lab to me? I'll give it back to you, okay? Don't be spiteful. This competition is so important. How could you not want to go? You must still be blaming me. Yes, after it was proven that Luna finished earlier than me and couldn't have copied, Professor King gave all the resources that originally belonged to me to her, including that lab, under the guise that only a true genius deserved it. Hearing her say this, the bystanders couldn't take it anymore. They glared at me viciously, with unconcealed mockery and sarcasm. Chloe, there's a limit to being a brat. If Luna wasn't kind enough to let it go, did you think giving up a crappy lab would be the end of it? Luna is begging you so humbly. It's for your own good. Do you know Luna hasn't even been able to run experiments for the last few days because of this? It's all your fault. Hearing this, I raised an eyebrow, looking at Luna as if realizing something. You haven't done any experiments the last few days either? Her eyes darted around and she stammered a yes. I said meaningfully, what a coincidence. I haven't done any lately either. Just as Professor King said, the overlap rate of the last experiment was 1 in 10 million. Such a small probability happening in this institute was impossible. Moreover, prior to that, Luna's data had matched mine multiple times. I could guarantee I hadn't plagiarized. After the fact, I checked the logs. Every single time, Luna's completion time was exactly 1 minute earlier than mine. Not 59 seconds. Not 1 minute and 1 second. Exactly 1 minute. It was as if she had a crystal ball and could foresee exactly what result I would get 1 minute later. It was too weird. To figure this out, I hadn't run any experiments for a few days. And now Luna had stopped working too. There are no such coincidences in the world. I lowered my eyes, thinking for a few seconds. You really want me to join the competition that badly? Seeing my attitude soften, Luna's eyes lit up. Of course. You're my motivation to move forward, Chloe. If you don't go, then I won't go either. She said it with absolute conviction. Everyone hearing this was moved by her passion. Only I knew exactly why she was doing it. Since that was the case, I nodded. All right then. I'll compete with you. Really? A flash of joy crossed Luna's face, her excitement barely concealable. She grabbed my hand tightly. Then I'll wish you a smooth competition right now. I smiled. Oh, it will be smooth. Under Luna's intense demands and threats to quit, Professor King had no choice but to apply for an extra spot. The day my application went in, everyone praised Luna. They said she was the bigger person, that I should remember her kindness and be eternally grateful. I ignored the gossip completely. I had a theory. There was something about Luna that allowed her to know what I was doing 1 minute in the future. She just had to do it before me, and suddenly I became the plagiarist. That was why she was desperate for me to compete. Without me, given her inability to even hold tweezers steadily, she'd just humiliate herself. To test my theory, the next day, right at the end of an experiment, I deliberately recorded a set of data incorrectly. Checking the time, I stood up to leave. Just as I reached Professor King's office door, the door to the lab next to me swung open. Luna stood there holding a stack of files, smiling innocently but with provocation in her eyes. Chloe, let me report first. I still have a lot of things to clean up in my lab. Unlike you, I'm busy, so you don't mind waiting, right? I shrugged, dropping my hand from the doorknob. Be my guest. Luna smirked, looking triumphant, and marched inside arrogantly. I waited quietly by the door. 2 minutes later, Professor King's roar came from inside. Are you brain dead? Can you not tell the difference between 0.1 and 0.01? If your eyes don't work, get surgery. This is a lab, not a vision correction center. If you can't even read a decimal point, what kind of science are you doing? Interspersed with the yelling was the sound of Luna crying. The students outside heard the commotion and gathered around. Chloe, what's happening? I spread my hands. I don't know. Sounds like Luna recorded her data wrong. As soon as I finished speaking, the office door opened. Out came a tear-streaked face. Since joining the institute, Luna had never been scolded. Now her eyes were red and swollen, her hair was a mess, and the report in her hand was crumpled. It looked like it had been thrown on the floor and picked back up. The moment she came out, everyone crowded around. Some comforted her, others asked what happened. She stared straight at me with red eyes. She rushed over, snatched the file from my hand, and flipped to the last page. Suddenly, all her grievances found an outlet. She pointed at a number on the paper and demanded, "Why did you get this wrong here? Why didn't you look more carefully? Did you try to sabotage me on purpose?" Hearing her words, everyone looked confused. I feigned ignorance perfectly. "Luna, what are you talking about? What did I get wrong? She poked the paper so hard it crinkled. This should be 0.1, but you recorded it as 0.01. If you hadn't recorded it wrong, I wouldn't have been scolded by Professor King. She glared at me with hatred. I leaned in, pretending to look at where she was pointing, then let out an "oh," tapping my forehead. Right, I did mess that up. Thanks for reminding me, Luna. Otherwise, I would have gotten yelled at for sure. I'll go back and change it right now. But my tone shifted. Why did you say I sabotaged you on purpose? And I haven't even presented yet. How did you know I had an error here? Unless you made the exact same mistake? I covered my mouth in exaggerated shock. That would be too much of a coincidence, right? Correct answers are few, but wrong answers are infinite. Luna certainly didn't dare admit she made the exact same error. Facing the suspicious and curious gazes of the crowd, she stammered, "Oh, of course not. I was scolded for a mistake somewhere else." Saying this, she regained her self-righteousness. "But your sloppy attitude affected me. Since Professor King gave you a chance, you should cherish it." She gritted her teeth, staring at me. "Don't make such a low-level mistake next time." I smiled brightly and agreed. "Yes, you're right. I'll definitely take my experiments seriously." "Yeah, right." After confirming my theory and discovering that Luna was an idiot who couldn't even spot a misplaced decimal point, I entered a phase of extreme Goblin mode. Instead of reagents, I poured vodka into the test tubes. Instead of charts and graphs in my reports, I inserted glamour shots of famous academics. Mixing truth with garbage, Luna couldn't tell the difference at all. She started getting yelled at every couple of days. Professor King's roars echoed through the entire institute. After I poured leftover soda into a petri dish, causing Luna to get chewed out yet again, she finally snapped. Bang! She shoved open my office door and marched up to me. In less than half a month, she had transformed completely. She used to look like a carefree princess, carrying the title of genius, producing results effortlessly. Now, after constant suppression and rejection, her face was gaunt and pale, lined with exhaustion. Her energy seemed drained and she radiated gloom. She stood grimly before my lab bench, her face twisted and savage, eyes spitting fire at me. "Chloe, you know, don't you?" Her gaze was venomous, like a snake lying in wait, hissing and ready to strike a fatal blow. I blinked innocently. "What are you talking about, Luna? I don't understand." Meeting her chilling glare, I didn't flinch. Instead, I straightened my back and smiled. The suspicion in Luna's eyes gradually faded. She had stood at my bench for too long, attracting attention. "Luna, what's wrong?" The girl closest to Luna walked over, looking at her with concern. Luna immediately dropped the aggression, covered her face, and let the tears fall. She gave me a resentful look and choked out, "I realize Chloe hasn't been taking her experiments seriously lately. We're about to take this data to the competition. I just wanted to persuade her to take it seriously." Hearing this, the bystanders looked at me with disdain. Why bother with her? All her past work was copied anyway. Now that she can't copy, of course she can't continue. Yeah, just focus on yourself. She's just making up the numbers. "No," Luna declared righteously. "I stand with Chloe." She turned to me. "Chloe, if you continue to slack off, then I will rot right along with you." The others panicked. "You can't do that. Luna, you're so talented, you're guaranteed to win. Rotting with her would be a waste." Luna wiped her tears and shook her head silently. Her expression was firm. Seeing persuasion wasn't working, everyone turned their guns on me. "Chloe, you're going too far. If you don't want to work hard, why drag someone else down?" I almost laughed at their self-righteousness. Who am I dragging down? Luna, obviously. The girl standing closest to Luna stepped forward. "Didn't you hear her? If you don't do the experiment seriously, Luna won't either." Others chimed in. "Don't be so selfish, Chloe. Luna is the hope of our institute now. If Luna doesn't win that prize, it's all your fault." Seeing they had said enough, Luna wiped her tears. "Don't pressure Chloe. Luna, you're just too kind. Some people just can't be helped even when given a chance. Useless mud can't stick to the wall." They went back and forth, practically stomping me into the dirt. Seeing the show was wrapping up, I smiled at Luna. Fine. Since you're so sincere, I realize my mistake. I'll focus on the experiment from now on. I won't make any more mistakes. After the torture of the last few weeks, Luna's guard was obviously up. She looked at me skeptically. Is that true? I raised my hand. I, Chloe, swear to conduct my experiments properly during the lead-up to the Helios Prize. Otherwise, I will resign from Professor King's institute. For the next period, I didn't make a single error. Every set of data was near perfect. Professor King couldn't stop praising Luna, declaring she was a lock for the prize. Only then did Luna relax. She shed her exhaustion and started glowing again. She walked with a spring in her step. Until the day of the competition. 1 minute before boarding the plane, she came running to me in a panic, saying she had lost my presentation materials. I'm sorry, Chloe, I really didn't mean to. Luna stood at the gate with red eyes, her voice holding just the right amount of tearful vibrato, even squeezing out 2 tears. I definitely put both our files together. I don't know how yours disappeared. My bag was just on the bench. I'll go check the security footage. Don't worry, I'll definitely find it for you. She turned to find the airport staff, but was stopped by Professor King. Enough. If it's lost, it's lost. No need to look. Professor King glanced at me impatiently. It wasn't anything important anyway. As long as your materials are safe, Luna. The rules of the Helios Prize stated that regardless of early registration, if you didn't submit your presentation materials on the day of the competition, it counted as a forfeit. During this time, Professor King had focused entirely on Luna, ignoring my progress completely. I was happy to be invisible and never reported to him. Naturally, he assumed I hadn't produced anything of value. Seeing Luna still crying, he frowned and scolded her lightly. All right, we're boarding. Stop crying, it looks bad. Luna whispered a yes and followed him. As she passed the ticket gate, she glanced back at me. Her eyes held the smug satisfaction of a successful plot. I smirked. When she insisted on holding my materials before we left this morning, I knew this scene was coming. The trip went smoothly. A car from the organizers picked us up after landing. As soon as we entered the venue, Luna handed in her materials immediately. After watching the staff log the file with her name on it, Luna let out a breath and turned to me. Chloe, Professor King says my report is flawless. I'm sure to win. I nodded. Congratulations, then. Maybe my reaction was too flat, not giving her the emotional payoff she wanted. She gritted her teeth. Don't you feel it's a pity? You worked seriously on those experiments for so long. If the materials hadn't been lost, maybe you could have won too. I smiled at her, my voice gentle, showing no sign of anger. Professor King was right. It wasn't anything important. Nothing to be pitiful about. Luna's gaze lingered on my face, scrutinizing me. She sensed something was wrong but couldn't put her finger on it. She could never have guessed that I had seen through her trick long ago. Even if she realized it now, it was too late. Professor King was nearby, bragging to teachers from other universities about recruiting another genius student. I monitored Luna's experiment the entire time. Every data point is perfect. Even I couldn't produce this. I guarantee it. The gold medal is hers. Professor King had a paranoid pursuit of research. If he said it was perfect, it really was. The others' eyes lit up, saying they would visit Luna's lab to observe after the competition. Professor King laughed heartily, and had Luna greet them one by one. Luna was panicking internally but forced a smile. She kept glancing at me. The calmer I was, the more she felt like thousands of ants were gnawing at her insides. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She cornered me when I went to the restroom. Chloe, you know, don't you? The same question as last time, but this time she was much more certain. I chuckled lightly. Know what? Know that you can predict what I do 1 minute in advance. Or know that you toss my materials into an airport trash can. Luna's head snapped up, staring at me intently. When did you find out? I flicked the water off my hands and slowly dried them with a paper towel. Let me think. Probably around the time you were harassing me, insisting I join the competition. Luna's face changed. Then why did you agree to compete? Weren't you afraid I'd keep predicting you? I laughed out loud. Afraid of what? You're so stupid you can't tell a decimal place apart. You'll believe whatever I do. Hearing this, she remembered my antics from when I first joined. Her eyes turned red with rage. You did that on purpose. I nodded, admitting it freely. Yes, I did it on purpose. Not only was that on purpose, but this was on purpose too. Take a guess. What exactly is in that file you just submitted? Luna es Nerez. Professor King reviewed everything I submitted. How could it be? She froze mid-sentence. Suddenly, her pupils constricted, staring at me in disbelief. I slowly smiled. Before leaving this morning, I had added a small snippet of code to the system and re-exported the experimental data. If I'm not mistaken, your materials contain the newly exported data, right? Did you check what it was? Luna looked like she was losing her mind. How would she know? For weeks, Chloe had been working like an ox, churning out perfect experiments. Luna had gotten used to just copying blindly, without using her brain. How could she have guessed Chloe would stab her in the back right at the finish line? And in the rush this morning, she only had a few minutes. She hadn't looked at the export once. Watching the smile on my face, cold sweat drenched her back. Her hands trembled at her sides. I took one last look at Luna's terrified expression and walked away. Soon Chloe found out exactly what that new data was. It was rows and rows of a single phrase. Uera moron. When the judges saw the material, they nearly had a stroke and threw it out immediately. Realizing something was wrong, the staff notified Professor King. Professor King opened the title page. His vision went black, and he nearly fainted. He stumbled to his feet and, in front of everyone, slapped Luna across the face. What kind of madness is this? Where is the material? Luna was knocked to the ground. The terror she had suppressed exploded. She screamed, sobbing. It's gone. It's all gone. Chloe sabotaged me. Chloe did this on purpose. Professor King finally remembered I existed. Chloe. Right, there's still Chloe. He rushed over. Where are your materials? Submit them quickly. I spread my hands. Luna lost them at the airport. You said they weren't anything important, so I didn't bother looking for them. Professor King's legs gave out. In the end, Professor King and Luna were expelled from the venue for malicious provocation. As for me, I had returned to the university long before that. The news that the institute was disqualified from the next competition reached the school before Professor King did. Professor King had guaranteed Luna would win, using that leverage to request massive amounts of equipment and space from the university. He had even ordered instruments from abroad worth over $10 million. His reasoning was that the institute would receive hundreds of millions in funding after the Helios prize, so buying these things was just pocket change. But now it had all turned into foam. The hundreds of millions in funding were gone, but the tens of millions in debt were firmly on his back. Professor King hated Luna to his core. He wanted to kill her, but he couldn't get anywhere near her. Because after returning from the competition, Luna seemed to mutate. Not only did her mental state shatter into madness, but she also aged rapidly, right before everyone's eyes. She kept muttering about systems and points. Soon, she was taken away by a group of men in white coats. She's probably lying on a lab table somewhere right now, being sliced apart. And I kept my promise to her. I left Professor King's institute. To be precise, Professor King's institute was repossessed by the university, and the students were disbanded. And I, relying on the true experimental data, now have a research institute of my own. Yendi.